It's 8 o'clock. I'm Scarlett, and good evening from the Netherlands, Amsterdam. And I know that people are following this Zoom webinar from the United States all the way to New Zealand. So thank you for being here. We're going to listen to Rick Mooney about one-finger scales. Good evening, Rick.
Good evening and good morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here in California. So this is one of the great things about Zoom is we can all get together from anywhere in the world and have a chat. So it's so nice to see you all. And one more time, I'll say thanks to Scarlett for helping to make this happen. Remind me at the end, I'll say this very quickly right now, but remind me at the end. This recent series of talks comes from the fact that Scarlett and I want to talk about Thumb Position Book 2. And as I was thinking about all the things that I needed to say about Thumb Position Book 2, it occurred to me that it just wasn't practical to do it all at once, that I needed to preface the discussion of that book with a whole series of preparations that allow us, once we get there, to be successful. So in 2 weeks' time, and again, we'll be more specific at the end. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to meet one more time on a Tuesday and talk about Thumb Position Book 1. And in 2 weeks after that, we will talk about Thumb Position Book 2. And that will sort of complete a whole series. One of the things that I said, I hope you've had a chance to see the one we did 2 weeks ago, the one about Book 10 posture. If you have not seen that, please do look at it, because it is the kind of thing that I can do. What I do, and what's going to underscore virtually everything we talk about here today, is how do you move around the instrument with freedom and balance and weight and no tension. And so we in the Book 10 posture talk, we talked about a whole bunch of activities that I can do with my young students, with Book 1 students, that helps get them ready for this. So the one-finger scales is quite more advanced, but we've done all that other stuff before. Let me mention that it came to my attention last time that there were some people here who were not teachers but were adult students. And I think that's fantastic, and I welcome you. I'm so glad that you're here. I am going to end up talking pretty much as if I am talking to teachers. But you'll get the information, and you may, I don't know, you may find some of this is pretty challenging for you. And if that's the case, that's fine. It's on recording. You can work yourself through it over time. Another thing too, and I thank you all for being on mute. I am happy to deal with questions at any time. If you have a question and it's a break in the talk and you want to unmute and ask, please feel free to do so. If you have a question and want to send it on chat, Scarlett is going to monitor that for us and ask me the questions as they occur, and I will try to save 5 minutes or so at the end so that if you have any questions and you want to wait till then, we can handle that. All right? One-finger scales, it came to me originally from Margaret Rowell in California. She was a fabulous cello teacher and worked with a violin guy named Paul Roland, and some of you may know because he and consequently she were very much into using your body in a natural fashion when you play the instrument. And to teach people how to be free and to move and to balance. Margaret's one-finger scale we will see right away when we begin actually talking about the pages that I sent out on PDFs. And then I subsequently added a whole bunch of variations to that that proceeds. So one thing I should say right now while I'm thinking of it, this is quite a big package of information. This I never give to people, I never give to students all at once. I think I'm going to give you quite a challenge here today by running through the whole sequence. This is similar to what I tell students when I used to travel around to summer institutes and conferences when I would give them a whole series of things I wanted them to do. But I had to explain to them, look, I only have these days to give this to you. And when you go home, you need to take these steps and you need to spread them out into real time. And you need to work on step 1 until you really have it, and then go to step 2, and so on. It's going to be like that today. The items in these pages literally are things that you'll deal with over years with your students. Okay? And as far as introductory comments, that's all I can think of right now. If I've forgotten something, I'll bring it in later. I do encourage you to join in and play as much as you're able. I would like to begin with this is one of the things that I want to say, which came up before. I'm going to be really trying very, very diligently not to repeat everything I said in the last session, so that we're moving to the new stuff. But one of the underlying issues of all of this is to give students activities which allow them to feel the thing you're trying to describe. You cannot describe a feeling with words, so don't even try. You need to give them a thing to do. Give them a thing to feel. Point it out to them. Give it a name if you want to give it a name, so you can communicate about the thing. But you give them stuff to do. And that was the focus of all the activities that I gave you in the Book 10 posture. And I would like to make a bridge between that discussion and the one we're having today by showing you two exercises, 2 activities that I did not present last time, but sets up, again, it sets up the idea. You might recall that we're talking about how to help students prepare their shoulders and their bodies in such a way that they can move around the instrument freely in the future. And with the younger students, with the beginner book 1-ish kind of students, I like to use harmonics and non-specific notes because I want them to get up here, but I don't want them to try to find a spot. I don't want them to try to push the string down and make a tone yet. All I'm doing is trying to help them set themselves up so that they can move around. And the one activity that I didn't include last time is, I call it Book 10 posture, Book 10 twinkle. And I will take credit for inventing this one. I try to give credit where credit is due. I remember walking into a workshop and I had a thing I wanted them to do, but none of them could play the actual piece yet that I wanted to do, so I invented Book 10 Book 10 twinkle kind of on the spot. So you'll recall that we were talking about moving the left arm this way, keeping the hand, the blob, soft hand, bouncing with these knuckle knocks. You will recall that I put a dot here for the little kids, and I have them put the side of their thumb on the dot where we can play a harmonic. So you can do those 2 notes, the D and the A. And then we can do the knuckle knocks, moving freely, landing softly. And here's what we do with Book 10 Twinkle, is we play, instead of the open strings, we play the harmonics. And then you play the other notes back here. And so on. So why don't we give this a try? Follow along if you have your cellos out. see, first of all, this really forces my shoulders and my elbow to be in the right place so that I can cover that distance and not run into the side of the cello and all the things that happen when the posture is not good. It also, what I was said last time, which is going to keep coming up in the one-finger scales as well, is every time I ask them to release their hand and move, release their thumb and move, is a good time. It's a good moment. Because the biggest problem we all face is squeezing back here with the thumb. And we really need to get rid of that right away. So this is one of the ways. Get them to move, play something very light and very easy up here, and get back and forth with freedom. The second item I'd like to share with you now, I will bring up again later, halfway through the discussion of the one-finger scales. This was invented by Carrie Hockett. We had some discussion about her at the last session, and she has a website, and she's created a lot of these activities, which are just wonderful for students. It's a perpetual motion, and I tend to use the Suzuki repertoire because that's my core set of pieces that I give my students. It really doesn't matter to me what repertoire you do. One of the things that I think is important about these talks that I am making is they are not about repertoire. You can do any repertoire you want. It's about how do you prepare a person, yourself, or your students to be successful when you get to the repertoire that you want to play. So, but I tend to use Book 1, Suzuki, Perpetual Motion. In Perpetual Motion, it goes like this, if you're not familiar, and if you're not familiar, you may have to listen to this one, but get Suzuki Book 1, it's worth it. There are 2 notes in a row here that are the same. And 2 notes in here that are the same. And that goes throughout the piece. To set this activity up, you need to make the children, the students, aware of where those 2 notes are. And so what Carrie Hockett has asked us to do, which is a really good setup, is to leave the second one out and create a space. And instead of actually playing the note, she says you leave a hole in that spot. Can we run through, those of you who know perpetual motion, can we run through this and leave the hole in that spot? Here we go. Is we're going to fill that hole with a harmonic D using our thumb, as we did in the Book 10 Twinkles. So it'll go like this. I'll play a couple of bars. So every time where there was that second note, where we created the space, we're going to fill that now with this harmonic D. So let's run this one down all together. Here we go. Okay, I made a little error in there, I apologize, but you get the idea, yes? And I say again, every time I get them to move their arm in this fashion, it's a good thing. All right, so let's start talking about one-finger scales now. The purpose behind one-finger scales is not truly to learn the notes. It is very important to know the notes, and I will be saying this kind of thing probably many times. It's very important to know the notes. It's very important to know the patterns that we're going to use, and it's very important to play them in tune. But the true reason for doing this with one finger is you eliminate the whole idea that you have any fingers at all. This finger is just the end of your arm now. And we get all hung up about what's on the end of the fingers when we're trying to find notes. We need to think about our arm. One of my other colleagues used to say, when you're playing, your arm carries your hand and then your fingers go up and down. But it's the bringing the arm around and feeling the balance of the entire weight from your back on the instrument that allows us to move freely and move without tension. So the whole point of playing a scale with one finger only is to avoid this idea, try to get rid of this idea about fingers and think more about the blob hand and the balance. The one, maybe I should say this right now as I'm thinking of it, because Scarlett pointed out that the very first thing that I'm going to talk about is what I sent you. It's called a one-finger scale in C. She pointed out that that's already in tenor clef. And I would like for you to know, first of all, this does show up in Suzuki Book 4. Okay, but there are people who will do this exercise before that. Second of all, I very rarely give the students these pages to look at. We do these by ear, we do these by copying, and by knowledge. There are other opportunities my students have in order to learn how to read the notes on the instrument, the books notably. Thumb position book 1, thumb position book 2, position pieces book 2. This is our opportunity to read the notes. So this is not a note reading kind of exercise. This is about an activity that gives us the feeling we want, and it's head knowledge about note names and distances, and it's mind and muscle connection. So very rarely do I give the students actually these pages. So tenor clef is a non-issue, frankly, with my students, wherever I decide to do this exercise. But I did this whole series of things so that I could give it out to teachers, again, for reference. So the idea here, in this small amount of time, I'm going to give you lots of information, and you need to have that and refer to it and spread it out into real time. So the one-finger scale, I really like using C and second finger. One of the things that's nice about the key of C is that it gives us many ringing notes on the instrument. And when things are correct and the weight is deep and the notes are in tune, you get ringing sounds on the cello. So that's a very nice thing. But I really like second finger because of the way it makes the hand balance. I'll be saying more about that in just 1 minute. But the idea is using my second finger puts my hand already in a place where it's going to work. The one-finger scale goes like this, with a retake like this, with a retake like this. So again, there are several items going on here. One, I must not be squeezing with my thumb. Students will make this kind of mistake. Watch for the mistake. right? So we have to avoid that mistake. We have to keep the hand balanced. So we're releasing our thumb and reinforcing the idea of all of the power and all of the weight comes from your back. It comes from your big muscles and your shoulder blades. And we have to learn to use that weight and that heaviness and that balance to do the hard work of playing the instrument. Not muscles, not tension, but weight and balance. All right? Now, I'm going to ask us to do this all the way up and all the way back. And to save us time in this discussion, we won't go both directions all the time, okay? But I always do have the students in lesson, when we're doing it in real time, go up and back. So let's just experience that once with the plain one finger scale at the top of that page, the one finger scale in C. Starting on C, feeling your back and making the circles. And this. And then we'll descend. One thing that I noticed when I myself was just playing is I cannot help but vibrato on these notes. It is not a requirement to vibrato on these notes. But Margaret used to say that when she taught a student from the beginning, she didn't have to teach him how to vibrato. It just started to happen. And I thought that was fantasy until I got good at this, and I realized that it does happen with my own students. If you're teaching them how to use weight and balance and softness, this first little wiggle on vibrato happens. And it doesn't mean it's a full-blown Dvorak concerto vibrato yet, but we all know that the worst vibratos are those that squeeze and are tight and shaky. And if we can teach the kids this first little loose wiggle, we're on the road. We're on the road to success. The turns now, fill-ins. They fill in the other notes. So here again, your arm is going to carry your hand and your fingers are going to go up and down. This one takes a little time for the kids. You got to teach them the notes, okay? I mean, they know the notes, but they got to see what's going on here. It remains in the key of C so that every time you move, the fingering pattern changes. So we have this one. And then we have this one. And this one. And this one. Now, it occurred to me in presenting this some time ago that you may, I hope you know the patterns that I use in Position Pieces Book 2, and that I'm going to use in Thumb Position Book 1, where we have a pattern 1 with the half tone, the semitone here. We have the pattern 2 with the semitone here. And we have pattern 3 with all whole tones. And with our thumb, we have a pattern 4, okay? It occurred to me that we can use those same numbers even back here. Even though I don't teach it that way at the beginning, by the time the kids understand that the distance between the notes, you can say, okay, this one's a pattern 2. With the semitone there. This one is a pattern 3. This one is a pattern 1 with the semitone there. So you've got to know the names of the notes so that you know the distance between them, so that you know what pattern you have to use. But here again, the idea is to arrive in place, to arrive with balance, to arrive with looseness. So playing these little in-betweener fill-in turns should just work. once you've got the notes down. So let's do this together, and let's go to the top, and then we can stop at the top, and you know that you should practice it going down as well. Okay, here we go. And so on. If you look at the next page, the one finger scale with, come on, I can't get a hold of one page, sorry. One finger scale with double turns. The point being now, one of the things that should start to happen with more ease when we're playing like this is velocity. Playing quickly should be more possible and more easy to accomplish because we're loose. As soon as you're tight, things get stiff and they don't move. But if you're loose, you can do this. And so on, with the idea that you're moving very quickly, you're using your weight, you're not thinking about fingers going up and down, you're thinking about the blob hand, and you're thinking about looseness and balance. So let's do this one to the top and stop. If you'll pardon me, I just blew it. I would like to start over again. So on, you would continue down. So here we go. We're setting us up to play quickly. We're setting us up to play the third movement of the Saint-Saëns Concerto. I mean, among other things, right? Right. Now, I included the next one for completeness sake, the one finger scale in B flat. This appears in the Suzuki Book 5, and it's because of the key of Danse Rustique and something else that's in that book. I almost never use it. I put it there, as I say, for completeness, because frankly, these little fill-in turns are a little different. But here's why I don't use it. I don't like using first finger, because first finger is too easy for the kids to put the finger down and have their hand out of place. When I'm doing second finger, it brings the hand right where I want it. If we're doing first finger, it's just way too easy for them to stick their finger out and be off balance. So you should know that this exists. You might find it useful for yourself. You might find it useful for some of your students. But if you do it, make certain that they don't come around and balance only on the first finger. They have to balance with the whole blob all at once. So I'm going to leave that one behind now.
Okay, thank you very much. This is quite challenging. I want to ask everybody to mute himself because now there is some noise coming in. So please check if you're muted if you do not have a question. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so now we have one finger scale with the note at the end of the fingerboard. This is my idea. This is one of the things I added on to Margaret's fabulous concept of the one finger scale. Here again, I want to give the students an activity which causes them to move around the instrument with freedom. And in this case, as with the harmonics and some other things that I did before, it's easy. It's easy because I don't care what note they play. Whatever note lives right there on the end of the fingerboard, that's the one. I don't care. You're going to go like this. then, and as I said, it just matters not. We're just got to have our elbow around, and we've got to have our shoulders established so that this nice little pivot occurs, and we're preparing the posture and the ease and the balance and the flexibility for moving around in more specific ways in the future. So let's do this too. Let's run up to the top with a note at the end of the fingerboard. With a circle, feeling your back. Feeling the looseness. With your shoulders down. And B. And C. And then, and so on. Okay? So you see here again, you can't just stick your finger out and make that work. You got to carry the entire hand with your arm all the way up and all the way back, thereby giving the students the feeling of how it's got to be, the feeling that I cannot describe in words, they can experience for themselves on a thing that doesn't require them to find a difficult note. Okay? Now, as we go, then it does become more difficult and it does become more specific. The one finger scale shifting to C is an in-betweener. You'll see where it leads in a minute. But the idea here is that now I am going to do the same kind of shift up and back, but now I'm going to arrive on a C over and over again. I have chosen the C for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is this is our home base thumb position spot when we get there, when we start doing thumb position in earnest. All right? So this goes, and then to C again, and then to C again, and so on. All right, so let's all give that a try. When I do that, I use my thumb as my target location, and I have a pattern 2, which puts my hand where my second finger where the C lies. So one of the advantages of using the target, and I'll be talking about this, one of the advantages of using the target, you don't have to try to find every single note on the fingerboard. You just have to find the landmarks. You find the landmarks, know the patterns, you can find everything else you need. Okay? So here we go with the shift to C. Here we go. Descend. Thought passed through my head and I forgot it. Oh, the idea here again, this is also not a shifting exercise. I don't mind hearing those big slides because I'm really after the smoothness of the motion. And that's why in several of these I have written little lines, meaning the glissando sound is perfectly acceptable for these exercises. Not jerking the hand, not trying to make it clean. That's a mistake in and of itself. Students think that if I'm going to make it clean, I got to move my hand fast, and that's not true. It only makes it work. Whether it's clean or not is what you do with the bow, but that's another topic. And so I'm interested in the smoothness and the ease, and not quick, not jerking. Let me hark back to perpetual motion. Now that we are finding a specific location up here, there's another version of this perpetual motion from Hartelijke, which is just fabulous. where every time you get to the 2 notes in a row, you remove the second one an octave. I'll hit F sharp next time. Every time you hit the note where there's 2 notes in a row, move your hand to the next octave. So let's give this one a try. We're getting, as you can see, we're rapidly getting more complicated with our work here. So let's give it a try. Here we go. That's a bit of a workout, but I'll tell you what, learning to find this spot, getting back and forth with ease, that's a good exercise. By the way, that happens to be a really good thing, and many of these things, in fact, happen to be really good things if you happen to be teaching group classes to your students. You can do it all at once with all the kids, all at the same time. And you may need to check it up at lesson and private lesson to be sure things are proper, but you can all do it together, and it's a lot of fun. Moving to octave shifts now. Now, instead of just arriving at a C each time, we're actually going to shift an octave. So we're going to start with C, and then we're going to go to D, and then E, and so on. This turned out to be pretty important to me personally. I used to think, back in the day, I used to think that I would have a kinesthetic feel in my arm about how far an octave is, and I could gauge that distance. Turns out it doesn't work. After years and years and years of trying to make that work, I just play it out of tune all the time. And so what I have decided is that I really need to know the specific locations up here. So here again is somewhat of the origin of my targets idea that starts way back in Position Pieces Book 1. And in order to get around this part of the cello, we have to know D and E as targets in order to find all the notes we need to be able to find in that part of the cello. And of course the ones across the string as well. Then we have to know G and A as well, both of them, in order to hit all the notes that we need to be able to hit in this part of the cello. Then you carry that very same idea up. You've got to know D and E and G and A. And if you know those targets up and down the fingerboard, everything else is available to you once you recognize the connections of the note names and the finger patterns and the village, which we talked about at one of my previous discussions about not only the neighbors that live next door, but all the ones that live across the street as well. Okay? So this is about learning the feeling of the octave and identifying certain places like D and E that you want to be able to pull out and use as reliable landmarks in the future. So let's do this again. We'll go up and stop. C, D, E. Oh, I just blew it. I played a C again. If you'll pardon me again, I'm going to start over. C. And now D. And now E. And so on. So when I've got to find a B up here, I think about the A spot and this finger pattern. And it allows me to find the B without having to try to learn it as a separate location. Now, the next one I don't think we'll play, but I'll demonstrate. The next one is where we'll start putting the turns back into all of this. We'll start by putting the turns here. And so on. It becomes truly meaningful when we go to the next one with turns at both ends. This is where it really starts to pay off, because now we're talking about making those same finger patterns and those same turns up in this part of the instrument. So, and D. Yeah, okay. Are you feeling worn out yet? These are challenging things. All right, let's try it though. Let's go up to the top and then we'll stop. G. And E. So on going down. So you begin to get a sense of where all the notes are. You begin to get a sense of how the spacing has got to change between the fingers as you get higher on the fingerboard. And it deals, I heard Janos Starker speak once, and there were two things, and many things he said were great, but there were two things that really stuck out to me. One was this business of the village. You've got to know on every place on the fingerboard what notes are available to you here on all strings. We're going to find this is necessary in a popper. You're going to find this is necessary in the Shostakovich Concerto. In the last movement, it goes, and they're all different patterns, you know. It's the only way to do it. So you got to know that. The second thing he said was the most challenging thing about playing a stringed instrument is the diminishing interval and the fact that each place you move, the finger patterns get closer together. And so it's again something we got to learn to feel, and here's an activity that helped us get that. Now, I would like to get to the thumb scale now. Okay, I really seriously can't get one page at a time these days. The thumb scale, a version of this exists in Thumb Position Book 2. Which we will talk about when we get there. But I'm always going to give them this earlier. This is one of the very particular reasons why I want to have this conversation before we start talking about the thumb position books. Because a real problem occurs when we start using our thumb as a finger. And lots of things go wrong because the only way people can figure it out is by pushing it down, okay? And you'll see this, and you'll see this, and this knuckle will collapse. As soon as this knuckle collapses here, you can't play any of the other notes there in tune. So what we have to do is this. We have to use our weight from our back, and I ask the students to tilt their hand backwards a little bit onto the thumb. The technical word for this is pronate, where your hand tilts in this direction. We pronate our hand on the bow, and we pronate our hand on the left hand as well. Okay? And if you pronate your hand and you feel the weight sinking into the string, then you've got the feeling that you want. And again, you can't let the people do this or this. You have to keep this going. So I'll tell you what. Let me see what's coming next. Let's add already a variation. Here is the basic thumb scale. I use the D in this occasion, and you'll see how that evolves. And then we're going to go slide on our thumb to E. And we're going to slide and play F sharp because we're now in the key of D. So that's great. You need to start with that. But I fooled myself on this. I decided, you know, it would be very cool if we could put our thumb down and wiggle our knuckles like this at the same time. And I fooled myself. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be, which meant I needed to practice it, right? And so you sink back in and put your weight on your thumb and you wiggle your knuckles in this fashion while I'm on D, right? And even trying to do it during the shift, I just F sharp. I have to get in the key of D. I'm sorry, I'm still in the key of C. Let's give it a try. Going up with the finger wiggles. Here we go. E, F sharp, D. And so on, and so on. And you can see that if you're wiggling your knuckles in this fashion, you're not allowing them to get locked up. And that allows for the flexibility in the finger patterns and all this other stuff I keep saying. The thumb scale with small turns is a nice little in-betweener step. We're going to jump to the long turns on the next page. And it's the long turns that are in thumb position book 2. All right, but as to teach it in smaller bits, this is a nice in-between step. With the wiggles in between. All right, but when we go to the long turns, we start adding the third finger note and get the entire pattern. One of the things that I found very cool about this is the very first one's pattern 1. And the next one is pattern 2. And the next one is pattern 3. And the next one is pattern 4. And so by running up this thing, you hit all 4 patterns, all one after the other. And you'll notice it's here again. In the middle, I'm still wiggling to make sure that I am loose. You can't expect that the kids are going to get loose right from the start. You have to help them continue to feel that. And one of the ways is wiggle and release in between just as much as possible. So let's just try this. Let's try up, going up with the long turns. So on, with the patterns reversing themselves on the way down. All right, Now we start to get to the place where the real macho cellists start showing off their thumb callus, right? Right. We've got the thumb scales in G now. This is why I chose to start the previous one on the D, is because I want to do these scales in the key of G. And you find you get to a spot like this, where you have to go F sharp, and C F sharp, and C natural. And it's got to change. And the point I'm going to make is this. These are the precise same notes that are going to occur in the Haydn Concerto first movement. That's why I want it in the key of G. All right? So let's try this. Let's try this with the, and we're almost done here, and we'll have time for questions. Let's start on the G. Let's do the thumb scales in G as written here. Here we go. Where your thumb must move from F sharp to C. So a little moment where the thumb has to move in there, that's worthwhile, because there are times when we have to move our thumb again in Haydn Concerto and all kinds of other places. So you can begin to see now what I'm saying. We're not going to start at the beginning of this package and run through it in a day, except when I'm trying to present the concept to people like you. And what you do is you've got to go home and break it out and work on each step, because the last one is the true test. The last one requires all the muscle memory, all the looseness, everything we've talked about, because there's no place to rest here. And so on. We won't even try that right now. How about that? I'll give you a chance to work on it at home. So you see, what we've got here is a sequence that begins way back. It can begin way back. As I said, it appears in the Suzuki books in Book 4, the original C major one-finger scale. I know teachers who will teach that in Book 2. And then you don't touch the thing again until later, you know. You wait, you bring it in at appropriate times as the students develop their own abilities and acquire, are facing up the repertoire that requires these things to happen. And by the time we're here doing this is big time. This is concerto level kind of thumb use and ease and motion. But you can see that by setting it all up with balance and flexibility and soft knuckles, it works. Now, you know, I totally forgot to tell you guys something. Let me tell it to you right now. Way back at the very first one-finger scale, way back when I kept saying you think about the blob, when you do things without worrying about what finger it is just the end of your arm, well, get one of these. You've all got a tennis ball at home, and you put it softly in the palm of the hand. You do not grip it. We're not going to be throwing curveballs, okay? Softly in the palm of your hand and put the weight on the ball on the string. And you can go, you know, all of this all works with the tennis ball. And it gives them that feeling of the blob hand, the fact that we're not trying to be concerned about fingers. You can do, on a piece like that has so many shifts in it anyway, to practice it in this manner really gives our arm and hand and balance the sense that it needs to have. Now, don't overuse it like any tool. Use it as much as it's relevant. One of the disadvantages is you are going to find that you have to sort of overbalance a little bit with your elbow in order to make this work. And I don't want to acquire that as a habit. So as an initial introduction to the feeling, I use it, then I set it aside. And you guys can give that a try on your own. All right, I'm glad I remembered to fill that in, because to me that's a really great tool. I have only a couple of minutes now, but I've stayed within my hour. I'm proud of myself because I tend to talk too much. But here we go. Question. Does anybody have any questions? Was there anything to chat? Are there questions in the chat?
Not really. Not really at this moment. I must say it's quite challenging. I feel like an Olympic athlete. So after a few years.
Yes.
There was something going on with the sound in the last quarter of an hour, and I was not able to solve it. Are there any questions?
Can I just ask, how long does it take for your thumb to become hard enough to do anything like the positions that we saw later in the session?
Yes, I understand. It's challenging for me to give you any sort of actual length of time. It happens over time, and it happens, and you have to maintain it. It's one of those things when you go on vacation and you come back and your thumb starts to hurt. I
killed my thumb after 1 minute.
No, yeah, there are numerous stories of people who have practiced after vacation and put blisters on their thumbs, and it's really a bad thing. Don't go there. All I can say is I tell students if it hurts, stop, okay? Because even it's going to hurt a little bit at first. You can take rubbing alcohol and rub it on the skin when you're done playing. It helps to harden the spot up, and it dries it out. Helps to harden the spot up. And other than that, all I can say is it depends on how much you actually do it. I do caution you, don't overdo it. You put a blister on it and then you're out of commission until the blister's gone, So just take it easy and over time.
Thank you.
I'm going to try something. Maybe this will get down. Wait. Okay, I don't know if that's going to help or not, but we'll try that. Anything else?
I have a question. I oftentimes will get students after they've already been learning for a year or two, and they have bad habits where they're really tight already.
Right.
I have a hard time unteaching bad habits. How do you teach them to be loose when they already have 2 years of experience?
Yes, it's a very good question. And if you ask me, the hardest thing I have ever done in my teaching career is fix people with that. It's terribly difficult. I even have one of my colleagues who said, you cannot fix a bad habit. What you have to do is eliminate it entirely and start from scratch and establish the good habit. So it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience. And the students got to buy into it a little bit. They got to understand. You got to understand why what you're asking to do is better, and what they're doing now. What I tell my students, the teacher's job, among other things, the teacher's job is to keep students out of dead-end streets. You don't want to get at the end of the street and go nowhere. And you have to, the teacher has to steer them to the street which move forward into the future. I would encourage you to be sure you do the things in posture and take some of those basic easy activities, use them as daily, even though it doesn't approach perhaps the difficulty level of the repertoire they're currently doing now. If you can get them to do the moving around and playing the horn and start to feel the feelings of being loose, and you know, you get out. Oh, what happened to Gary? Here's Gary. You get out what I showed in the last for Gary, squishy voice, sink down, get the feeling, and all I can say is if you can do a little bit of that each day and then try to get them to begin to integrate it into the piece. The problem is when they start playing their pieces, the old habits come back because the mind is occupied by the piece. And so we need to get the habit done with the daily kind of issue. So it's terribly difficult, really. But that's the best thing I can say is all the talking about will help.
Okay. I think that's Julia. She raised her hand. Julia, are you there? Have you got a question?
Yes. When I play with my bow and when I start playing, it's like this, like a regular bow hold. But then when I start playing, it kind of slips up and crumples and then starts getting tired.
That's a very good question too. And the possibility of one more session that we can talk about the bow. I've been almost entirely talking about the left arm in the last two sessions, and we can talk about the bow. Okay, imagine this. Imagine that for my students that you've got octopus fingers. There are suction cups on the end of the finger, just like an octopus. And if you hold your bow up this way and put the hair out and let the fingers hang onto the side of the bow with heavy weight, you should get the feeling of that getting stuck there, okay? Stuck like the suction cups. And if you get the feeling of being stuck and not like squeezing the thumb, that's when these things start to happen when the thumb squeezes. If you can use your weight for the power and the suction to hold on to the bow, well, that's when you'll be able to do everything else you need to do and keep your bow hold working properly. So, you know what? There are times with my own students where every single day, every student at every level, from beginner to advanced, every day on open G. For this very reason, get the feeling, how can we hold the bow without squeezing on the thumb? So I would, it's kind of a short answer. There's a lot of stuff that can happen, but there's something to start on open G every day. Think about the fingers. Okay?
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. That's a really good question. All right, I promised to do this and almost forgot. Next session. Next session, 26th October. 26th October, it's another Tuesday. We'll have it at the same time as to, I will not have to send to you. The discussion will be thumb position book 1. So have your book, have the thumb position book, and we will thumb through it and follow up on some of these preparations that we did today and see how we put them to practical use in that book, which in turn gets set up for the next session, which I'm going to just tell you is November 9 in a Tuesday, where we'll talk about thumb position book.
Okay. The sound is pretty bad on my side, so I'm not sure if I'm repeating things. Rick, everybody who attended, who entered this Zoom, everybody who entered will receive an email with a link to the YouTube video, which I will create from this recording, and everybody will get an opportunity to re-enter for the next session with thumb position book 1, which is super, in 2 weeks. Fantastic. I hope that everybody will join us. Rick, is it also for people who do not play 2nd to 4th position already?
The thing that this would do is give you a look into the future. There are certain things you can do, and I'll try to say this when we actually talk. But for instance, playing here in thumb position is something you can do before you actually get to pieces with thumb position in them, because it helps. It's an easy and it helps the feeling and the pattern way. So there will be a few things that people can get out of the discussion, even if they're not playing very much yet. Beyond that, it's a matter of getting the recording so you can refer to it as it becomes more pertinent to your own.
Okay, thank you very much. I see people thanking you in the chat, thanking me. You're very much welcome. Everybody's very welcome. People who have listened to this, do you mind, before you leave this webinar, do you mind letting me know in the chat how the sound was for you? Please give me some information to see if it's just my computer or if you also had the same issue with the sound in the last half an hour, last 20 minutes.